I notice on this slide a key piece of collaboration at the beginning of the job. It looks like, is that a bottle of wine there?
Which one is that?
I went back a couple of slides.
Oh, yes.
I have found similar. Sometimes if you have a break in you're not able to move forward, sometimes you have to go out for a beer with the stakeholders and really find out what's really what's really concerning them about the front end of a project. So, well, I'm half joking. It's actually been a strategy of mine.
Now, that bottle was put there specifically at the framing and alignment of that session, and it was given to the project owner. It's a good bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, and it was said that once this project goes into development funding approved, that bottle will be opened by all around the table.
There's some real motivation.
It's a serious job, that one.
Okay, so a little bit about what a project charter looks like in the healthcare environment. We've had a lot of experiences where we jumped into that validation process, where we had a big team on board and we had a contractor and designers, and we started spending a lot of money, but we still hadn't decided what we wanted to build. So we were spending a ton of money pretty significantly developing diverse options. And what we found out from doing a root cause analysis is that we needed to spend more time in that feasibility stage and document some of the key assumptions for the project. So we have a project charter that for us could be 4 pages. It's not a very detailed document, but it sets out really the key important factors of the project. So believe it or not, it can take us a long time to figure out who the key decision makers are. So who is the operational leader for that site? If it's a new building, it would be a very high level person. If it's just a single clinic, who's going to be the lead person that's going to run that clinic when it's open? We need a strategy lead who's running the pro forma analysis that we can work with. A lot of times we want them to just give us a high number. What is the highest number that this project still makes sense at? And then we can tell you pretty quickly if we're going to be anywhere close to that. Sometimes we have I'm not going to show you my cards and you don't show me your cards. So I'm working on the budget, having no idea where the budget needs to be. So we have design and planning leads. These are internal folks. Project management, also internal, who's going to lead this feasibility stage for the budgeting and scheduling side, IT, medical lead. So we literally lay out, this is who the lead for strategy is. This is who, there's just a list of people, what their job title is and what their name is. And then we have a scope. This is really just a bullet pointed list. This is not a design document or anything. And it talks about, okay, this is what the project is. And more importantly, this is what the project is not. So a very common one, if we're going to do a new clinic, is, does it have radiology? Yes or no. Does it have an MRI? Yes or no. Because a lot of times we used to start these projects and then in the middle of design, they'd say, oh, by the way, we want an MRI, which costs a couple $1 million to install. Plus it takes a huge amount of space. It has structural impact. So we need to know these big yes, no answers before we even start designing. And then through that alignment session, what are the high level goals? How are we going to measure success of the project? And we tried to develop a list of needs versus wants. So there's things that absolutely have to happen or the project is not feasible. And then there's things that we want that are, if possible, if within the schedule and budget, we can integrate some design feature, we'd like to do that, but it's a want. It's not a requirement. And conditions of satisfaction is the last part. This is how we're going to measure these components to determine at the end of the job whether it's successful or not. And then probably the most important step is we get the key decision makers to then sign this charter at the bottom. We route it around and they have to sign it And then all through the validation process, we check back to say, are we in line with the project charter? And we will ask the leadership to amend the project charter if any of those in scope, not in scope things change that are material to the project.
James, one question. If we go back to that page, I'm impressed to hear that this is a document with the formal signature of the key stakeholders, which is done pretty much at the beginning of the project. And knowing that these type of infrastructure projects are taking many years to be implemented, I'm wondering what are the things that you freeze here in this document that eventually or typically change, or where you see the most pressure to be changed. For instance, when you say what is in and what is not in the project, isn't that market condition changing in 2 years from the signature that it's requiring to revise the design and these choices on the project charter? Or can you hold on these decisions?
Davide, you're absolutely right. So these things do change, especially if it's a ground up hospital in California. Typically takes 10 years from this initial project charter phase to first patient. What this allows us to do is track when major assumptions have changed. In the past, when we had projects go significantly over budget, there were a lot of process breakdowns, but there were also a lot of just pure scope changes where we had, say, a shelved floor that in the middle of the project, demand is increased, and we say, okay, now we want to build out that shelved floor. And what this sets up is a conversation with leadership where we have a formal approval process when the scope of a project gets amended, and we can document whether we're funding that amendment or not. Because what we're really concerned about is a shelved floor turns into a completely built out floor, but we use the project contingency to fund that added scope. And then at the end of the job, we have no contingency left for the typical things that contingency is designed for. So it absolutely does change, but it makes the change management process more formal. It also means that only the top level people in the organization can approve material changes to a project, where I used to deal with a director level engineer or an imaging director would push me to change the equipment, but they would never sign anything. So I would go through a lot of work with my team and spend a lot of money and effort to change scope and never get that change funded. This gives me the power to come back and say, that's not in the project. If you want to put it in the project, we have a process for that. And here's who signed off that that's not part of the job. And this is the process to get it integrated into the job.
Very much the same in the process industry. You have to have very strict change management controls.
So with this, as we're coming to the conclusion here, and so start thinking of your question, some immediate takeaways that we came up with collectively, and everyone else can chime in. For me, it's that you need to get alignment with your owner organization, and then this defining what is and is not in the job at a high level is extremely important, as we just covered. That is probably the biggest tool for me in being successful, is being able to go back to my leadership when a significant material change is being proposed and people pretend that it's been part of the project all along. Charles, what would you add to this?
No, it's absolutely true. You have to make sure that you understand the needs that is on the table and make sure that it's not apparent or superficial. The main issue is that many times people have a problem, they see a solution in their mind and they put that solution as the objective, whereas it is not necessary a proper root cause analysis to make sure is this the right thing? If I can just think about that early slide, which said the guys wanted to put a reduction unit in the steel plant, and instead of putting it at the source where they could save 40% in transport costs, they put it in at the plant, and they still had all the costs, transport costs in, because they defined the problem as we want to build a reduction plant at the steel mill. So it is a lot of time you have to spend to make sure you understand the needs. Then the vision of what needs to be achieved, and then you have to work that process. And the quality of the stage gate process and the change control at each of the gates, and making sure that there is alignment between everybody. If you don't have that alignment, you have a lot of rework.
Yeah, I think that there's some patience as leaders that we need to have to control the urge to jump past this step and get into design. This is a very important stage, and I know I'm many times eager to skip this step and get drawing.
The higher you go in the organization, the more eager they are to skip the step.
Yeah, but they are not the ones that are executing those projects. So this is a good news. I agree with all said so far. I think the importance of meeting the criteria of the stage gate in order to go to the next is extreme, and I think it's extreme in the earliest phases even more. When we talk about front-end loading, this is indeed the notion of having a team that starts doing all what is needed, so anticipates all that is needed to get studied and decided and designed before it's getting too late, before decisions are taken, money is spent, and then you need to rework. So these are the phases that you really must have under control, that must be really executed at best. And there is a literature around this, statistics that are proving what I'm saying. The better those stages have been accomplished, the better will be the result of a large investment project.
Mm-hmm.
So, Davide, would you share with us what we'll be talking about next?
Yes, because I was saying that's, let's say, the best practice, what we are saying so far, and there are companies that are very good at that, but a large investment project is a complex beast that needs to be managed with realism and with professionalism and with pragmatism. Things that are characteristic of those projects cannot be changed. One is during the life cycle of a large capital project, there are changes happening. And these changes are happening for different reasons. It can also be coming from outside. So there is a new competitor entering into the market where you plan your investment, or there is a new product requirement, and maybe you want to offer that product as well. There are assumptions that maybe are changing. Think about volatility of raw material price. There is a new CEO in the company that is willing to change the strategy. Or there are other complications in the geopolitical situation, as you can imagine, recently import duties or other things happening. So we cannot dream that everything will really stick as at the day zero. And it's really important what James said before, that if there are changes, these are changes that must be documented and must be decided. So that there must be a formal process to do this. And when changes are arriving, the question is again, is this a mandatory requirement or is it nice to have? So all of this tells us that there must be a mechanism to keep the project on track and keep it as it should be. So keep it at its optimum. The next webinar, we are talking about management during design. And we will talk about what this mechanism can be. How can we periodically revise the expected performances and see if we are still generating the best value for all stakeholders, which we call typically, or we measure with net present value generated during the investment lifetime. This is what we're talking about next time, and we will really try to understand what tools the project teams can have in place, what are the mechanisms, and what is the mindset to really strive always for the best value of their projects. Bearing in mind the complexity, bearing in mind that it's not a static picture, it will keep changing. People are also changing in the project team sometimes. So we need to capture all of this and make it under a very strong and robust process in order to always keep the value of that project at highest.